So welcome everybody to our session 3 of the happiness seminar. So in the first 2 sessions, we talked about the yoga of crisis, how the Bhagavad Gita starts with Arjuna's crisis. And, and in the first session, we talked about that, how to use a crisis for deeper realization, for newer evolution of our consciousness. In the second session, we talked about who we truly are, because without knowing who we are, we cannot really find the happiness that we are looking for, because our happiness is connected to the concept of who we are. And we talked about the difference between body, the mind, intelligence, and the self, and what it means to be a soul. So we talked about that, and today in this session we'll talk about the mind. So before we do that, we'll let me share the verses from the Bhagavad Gita where Krishna talks about the mind. So the mind kind of appears in the first chapter itself, where Arjuna declares to Krishna that he's feeling very unsettled. And so in like text 30 of the chapter 1, it says, when Arjuna sees his family members ready to fight with him, he breaks down. And he says, I am now unable to stand here any longer. I am forgetting myself, and my mind is reeling. I see only causes of misfortune, O Krishna, killer of the Kesi demon. So when Arjuna is saying all this, you can see that it is his mind which is saying all this. And then we also go through these cycles when we don't know what to do. When our mind is reeling, we feel completely bogged down, shut down. We only see bad things happening around us. So this is Arjuna's mind talking to him.
So the next verse, text 46, this is what happens. So it starts with Arjuna experiencing this, anxiety in his mind. And then he says, Sanjaya said, Arjuna, having thus spoken on the battlefield, cast aside his bow and arrows and sat down on the chariot, his mind overwhelmed with grief. So again, we see that his mind is completely overwhelmed with this grief and he's not able to think straight. So we'll keep going.
And let's see. So Krishna addresses his anxiety and his situation by giving him knowledge about the soul first. And he addresses the mind in like starting with text 48. He says, perform your duty equipoised. O Arjuna, abandoning all attachment to success or failure, such equanimity is called yoga. So it's not directly talking about the mind, but this word equipoise, this is completely related to the mind. How, in order to do anything properly, our mind needs to be equipoised. And when we are free from any attachment and success or failure, then that equanimity is called yoga. So it relates to mind here.
So this is a very, text 55 is a really nice verse which talks about the mind. So the Supreme Personality of Godhead said, O Partha, when a man gives up all varieties of desire for sense gratification, which arise from mental concoction, and when his mind, thus purified, finds satisfaction in the self alone, then he is said to be in pure transcendental consciousness. So we see that all our desires, they actually arise from this, mind. And the mind, when it is purified, that's when we can find happiness. So one of our starting premises in this whole seminar has been to find happiness, and that can only be found when the mind is purified, because right now the mind is filled with all kinds of vrittis or disturbances or sense desires which prevent us from experiencing peace and satisfaction.
And the next verse, Krishna says, one who is not disturbed in mind even amidst the threefold miseries, or elated when there is happiness, and who is free from attachment, fear, and anger, is called a sage of steady mind. So I guess Krishna is giving us clues of how to be really happy by not just trying to satisfy the mind with whatever it wants, but really making the mind steady. And he's going to tell later on how to make the mind steady. But without a steady mind, there is no happiness.
Let's continue. I think because we have so many slides, so I think
yeah,
you guys can read all of this yourself. And I guess we can, I think we can just finish it off with text 70, right?
Yeah, go ahead.
A person who's not disturbed by the incessant flow of desires that enter like rivers into the ocean, which is ever being filled, which is always still, can alone achieve peace, and not the man who strives to dissatisfy such desires. So there's a beautiful metaphor that is being used here. Rivers entering into the ocean. The reason why the ocean is so great is because it is so deep. It does not get disturbed, like unlike a puddle, which is, if a puddle receives rain, then it is full. And if it does not receive rain, then it becomes dry. But instead, the ocean, even if there is no rain, the ocean is still full. And if there's a lot of rivers entering into the ocean is still not agitated. So the idea of spiritual knowledge is to enter into such a state of consciousness where we are not disturbed by gain or losses. And that's what we're going to talk about today in our presentation, which is about the mind.
So I think we can stop here, right? These are
I think
verses.
that's and we recommend that you guys can read this on your own time. And if you have any questions, then please feel free to ask in our WhatsApp group.
Okay. So let me stop here.
And just for you guys to know that this is more of a macro level overview. We are, looking at happiness. We're looking at Bhagavad Gita. Those of you who are really interested in doing a deep dive, we are also starting another group where we're going to do verse by verse. So you can let us know, and then you can join.
After you finish the seminar, then you'll be able to benefit from that. Hi, Matt. Really good to see you. Thank you for joining.
Hi, Matt. So good to see you.
So let me open the presentation. So our session is called Mind Your Mind, becoming aware of the mind. So we're going to talk about what is the mind, the power of mind, the different functions of the mind. Most of the time we don't appreciate between ourselves and the mind. And then the 4 T's for transforming the mind, like making it steady, like a sage.
So this is this is a story from the Mahabharata, and it kind of depicts the state of a conditioned mind. So there was once a man who was being chased by an elephant, and this was a mad elephant. And for both of us, we are from Assam, and that place is known as land of elephants. And especially if an elephant becomes mad, then they're quite dangerous. They can even overthrow a truck. So here was a man being chased by an elephant, and he's running, and then he comes to the edge of a cliff. And when he comes to the edge of a cliff, he looks back and he sees the elephant is really like in rage and he's going to attack him. And he looks in the front and there's no place for him to go. So he just takes a dive into the, over the cliff. But when he jumps over the cliff, he doesn't fall completely. He actually gets, sort of stuck in this, there was a branch of a tree. He gets stuck on that. And in this picture, it doesn't show, but he's upside down. So he's hanging upside down on this branch of the tree. And the elephant comes and he's really angry. And so then what he does is he holds the trunk and he starts to shake the tree really, really hard. So when he does that, there's actually a beehive on that branch, above that person, above the branch on which this person is hanging. And so when he shakes it, and all the bees, they come out of the hive. And then when he looks down into the valley, he sees that there is a pit of snakes. And then if that was not bad enough, then he sees that the branch on which he's hanging, there is a white mouse and there's a black mouse, and they're actually cutting away the branch of this tree. And in the midst of all of this, where everything is like, quite dismal, from the top of that honey, the beehive, a drop of honey falls on his tongue. And then he tastes that honey and he says, "Oh, it's really a good life." So,
and he's looking forward to that. His whole attention is focused on the next drop of honey, and he's like, he becomes almost oblivious to all the danger around him.
Could you just go ahead? I think somebody's asking for a link, so you go ahead.
Okay. So in this example, we can see that how, even though this person is in so much danger, there are 2 things happening. That one, he kind of becomes oblivious to this danger. and his mind is now latched on to enjoying this very meagerly pleasure from the drops of honey that are dropping from the beehive. So this kind of shows that our mind is geared, is very attracted to happiness, and even in this so much dangerous situation, it is seeking happiness. That is the nature of the mind, to seek happiness. But is this happiness is a good kind of happiness? That is a question. And is this a real happiness? That is a question. This
and the
is,
reason, can I just interject? The reason for that is the Vedanta Sutra says that the living entity by nature is pleasure seeking, Anandamaya Abhyasa, which means that it is a natural call that we're looking for pleasure in this world.
So in this analogy, basically this mad elephant is death, which is chasing us.
No. Why don't we ask? Why don't we do the little quiz here?
Okay, go ahead.
So let's do this little quiz now. So what do you think is the elephant represents? What do you think is represented by the bees that come out of the beehive and sting the cat? What do you think the black mouse and the white mouse, what do they represent?
The tree and the branch. So what does the black and white mouse represent? The branch represents, the elephant represents, the bees represent. Any guesses?
Yeah. Anybody?
Honey is worldly pleasure.
Honey is the best that we get in this world. Thank you. Thank you. What do you think is the black mouse and the white mouse? Somebody else.
People who want us to fall down, who don't like us to succeed.
Some people who want us to fall down. Okay.
Vidarbha, is your internet connection fine? Can you check which
okay.
one?
No. Yeah. Thank you for reminding me. Yes. Thank you. Yeah, keep going.
Okay. White mouse and black. Yeah, go ahead. Anybody else?
Because of shortage of time, maybe we should just give the answers.
Yeah.
So,
I don't have so much time.
So the black mouse and the white mouse, they represent day and night. It was actively cutting away the days of our life.
And then the branch and the tree represent our body, which is basically the day and night they are cutting that branch. So our body is going away every day. And the bees, they represent all the other people around us, in our family or outside, the tax guys, whoever you can think of. They are basically coming and stinging us all the time.
So that's the first aspect where the mind actually experiences the happiness or the pleasure. Actually, the body never experiences the happiness and pleasure, it's the mind. So here is another one, which is actually one of my favorite poems, that the mind is such a, we are dealing with such a crazy mind that even when it has everything, it does not experience satisfaction. So here is the story. There once was a man whose ambition was to see a certain fabled mountain. One day he set out to travel there, taking with him his pack, his tent, his bedroll, and food for the journey. So on the first day, he walked through a forest of trees in which every leaf was a butterfly. Second day, he passed a blue lake, which had like dancing golden mosquitoes. Third day, he saw a river of molten bronze. Fourth day, he saw a beautiful woman spoke to him from the heart of a willow. On the fifth and sixth, he found true love, and he told it to wait till he came by again. Seventh day, he slept on the outskirts of a city of glass, and it goes on and on. But and he's actually walking to see this fabled mountain, right? So, and in the journey, he's seeing all these beautiful things. But when he gets to the cliff, he finds the mountain was obscured by a cloud. And all
your voice is breaking up, Vidarbha.
Why don't you continue? There's a big storm here, so maybe because of that. Why don't you continue?
Maybe your microphone is not right. I can check. So when he gets to the mountain, the mountain is obscured by a cloud, and only thing he could see was just mist all around, and nothing much. So he got disappointed, and he started walking back, and he again walked back to that beautiful valley, and then sunshine and starlight and rainbows, and it was a beautiful walk all the way back home. After 9 days of like traveling so traveling so much, he finally reached home, and then his neighbor came running to him, very excited that he might have seen something wonderful. When he asked this person, he says, "What did you see? How was it like?" And this man said, "I saw nothing," because his mind was just fixed on that mountain that he was going to see. And when he didn't see that, he completely kind of ignored all the beautiful scenery that he saw while coming and going. So this is another aspect of the mind. Even despite having everything, the mind may say, "I don't have anything." It just fixes on one thing that is not working in our life, or two things are not working in our life, and it just fixes, my life is just totally empty, and it's nothing going on in my life. This is another side of the mind. I saw nothing, or I see nothing.
So we can continue. So here is it's interesting idea that there are, in the field of psychology, in the field of psychology, there is what is called ants, that there are actually ants in our mind, and they are, it's an acronym for automatic negative thoughts. So it is described through research that there are up to 80% of our thoughts are negative, and those thoughts, 95% of them are repetitive. We can see that how, we're living with this mind. Imagine living with a person who was constantly being negative, and he was continuously nagging, and he would say the same thing over and over and over again. We would want to live with such a person, but that's what we are living with when we're living with our mind.
So can you identify your ants? Negative thoughts and repetitive thoughts. Just think about them. These are some of the common ones. Unrealistic ant. Basically looking for something which is not real, and always thinking that I don't have enough. So this guy, you see now in India, people get 100 out of 100 or 99 out of 100. Somebody was telling me, a friend of mine, and he was saying, my son got like 98 out of 100, and he was like so upset that he didn't get 100. And this can happen in all different walks of our life.
And then, of course, we have overgeneralizing that, I always, you always do this. I always fail. So things like that. We're not going to spend too much time on each one of them, but you get the idea, right? Labeling. We're always labeling ourselves, labeling others. So these are the ants that are hovering in our mind all the time.
Blaming others. We always try to find somebody as a cause of our misery. Blaming self. That is also a big one, that I'm useless, I deserve this misery, and so on and so forth. So these are ants which are always bugging us, and we are constantly struggling with this mind. And as you can see in this slide, mind has become a big problem in the world now. Mental problems are common even amongst children who are going into elementary school, like 2nd grade, 3rd grade, middle school, high school. Kids are thinking of suicide nowadays, which was very, very uncommon. People feel worthless, or they feel that there's no purpose to life, or they feel so much hate and anger. Like in America, it is astonishing. For the last 2 years, there is on average more than 1.5 mass shooting every day. So already it's like 3 months in the year, almost like 140 or 150 mass shootings have happened in the US. And it's all because of the mind, which is very disturbed. People are just coming out and killing each other.
So the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, is warning of an accelerating mental health crisis among adolescents, with more than 4 in 10 teens reporting that they feel persistently sad or hopeless, and 1 in 5 saying they've contemplated suicide. This is from Washington Post. And this is the state of mental health, not just in the US, where of course it's really, really bad, but all over the world. Wherever we go, we're here in Pune, and it's the same thing. Children are really struggling, adults are struggling, and this is all because of, the mind. We don't even understand what the mind is and what the needs of a mind are. And so we'll talk about all that, and hopefully we'll also talk about tools that can help us as we deal with the increasingly complex world.
So our Bhagavad Purana is very expertly talks about the power of the mind, how powerful the mind. It says all the senses have been under the control of the mind since time immemorial, and the mind himself never comes under the sway of any other. He is stronger than the strongest, and his godlike power is fearsome. Therefore, anyone who can bring the mind under control becomes the master of the senses. So it's not something trifle. Sometimes we think, oh, mind, okay, it's not a big deal. I'll work it out. I'll figure it out as I go. But we should not take our mind very lightly. It is a very powerful entity. It's the most powerful entity sitting within us. And if we don't deal with it properly, it can just take us on a ride.
Actually, our happiness index is directly proportional to the state of our mind. And it's amazing. We're talking about these ancient texts, which is 5,000 years old. And, we think that mindfulness is such a new contemporary concept. But these ancient wisdom texts, they talk about all of this stuff. What is the mind? How do you control the mind? So it's so relevant, even though it was spoken like such a long time ago. So we can read the next verse. So this is a verse from the Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna tells Arjuna that one must deliver himself with the help of his mind and not degrade himself. The mind is the friend of the conditioned soul and his enemy as well. For him who has conquered the mind is the best of friends. But for one who has failed to do so, his mind will remain the greatest enemy. So this is what we are dealing with. We're dealing with the mind, who has the potential to become our best friend, but right now it's acting as our worst enemy. And a very trivial example would be try sleeping, and you keep telling yourself, please, especially if you're really wired up, the mind just would not settle down, right? The mind just doesn't settle down, no matter how hard you try. So we see that we're always struggling with this mind. And Krishna is saying that, it's a good idea to try and control the mind, transform the mind, so that the mind can actually work in accordance with our desires. A best friend means someone who wishes us well, right? Who does things for our benefit.
So by default, mind in our conditioned state, mind is our enemy. So we talked about this in the previous session, that how are we the mind? And Bhagavad Gita says, no, we are not our mind. Mind is just a part of us. It is just a tool that is given to us to navigate this world. The real person is the soul. And the soul is covered by these two bodies. One is the subtle body, which is made up of the mind. And the external covering that we see is the body. So mind is, in a sense, is in between the soul and the body. And because we are not aware of the soul, we just think that mind is me. Whatever the mind is saying, that is me. But that is not the truth.
I think, therefore I am, right?
Yeah.
So that's an aphorism, and that's what people think, that because I can think, or my mind thinks, so that's who I am. So we can continue. We also talked about this. This is a very famous metaphor from Katha Upanishad, and we won't go into too much detail, but just for those of you who have joined new, the 5 horses are the 5 senses. The person, the real self, is Atman, consciousness, soul, who's kind of lying in a state of stupor and has handed over the power of attorney to the mind, and is saying, okay, my intelligence and mind are actually, intelligence is basically a function of the mind. And so, he said, okay, you take me wherever you want me to go. And so now the soul has relinquished his power, and the mind is driving. The 5 horses are just dragging the mind and dragging the intelligence and dragging the soul wherever they want to go. And so it's a very hopeless and very helpless kind of a situation for this, this Atman, who is really the one who's actually giving all the power, to these inanimate matter.
So let me share the sound. I always forget that. Are you body with a mind or a mind with a body?
Look at your hand. How do you know it's really yours? It seems obvious, unless you've experienced the rubber hand illusion. In this experiment, a dummy hand is placed in front of you, and your real hand is hidden behind a screen. Both are simultaneously stroked with a paintbrush. No matter how much you remind yourself the dummy hand isn't yours, you eventually start to feel like it is, and inevitably flinch when it's threatened with a knife. That may just be a temporary trick, but it speaks to a larger truth. Our bodies, the physical, biological parts of us, and our minds, the thinking, conscious aspects, have a complicated, tangled relationship.
You can watch this, complete video later on. But it's kind of we are mixed up with our mind, and that's the reality. It becomes hard to distinguish whether something is coming from our mind or if something is coming from ourself, which is the real soul. And this is what Bhagavad Gita helps us to untangle our mind from ourselves.
So I think we can skip this. I think we already went through this last time, that, the brain does not create consciousness, but it's actually, this is a neurosurgeon, Dr. Alexander, who says, based on his research, that actually the mind is, something that's even beyond this physical body and survives the physical body.
And it's not the brain also. The brain is not the mind.
Or should we just quickly watch it, do you think?
No, I guess we don't have time. So the main thing to understand is brain is not the mind. The brain is just the office of the mind. But the mind is a separate entity that accompanies the soul from life to life. And whenever the soul gets a new body, the mind goes with it. And then the mind will use the brain as a function to do its work.
Actually, I think what he says in this interview, if I remember correctly, is that even after somebody is clinically, brain dead, they're able to perceive and they're able to report back even. So what he says is that they have seen so many such cases and they have analyzed and done research, and they have come to this conclusion that there is something that survives the death of the physical body.
And
the brain, yeah. Go
So
ahead.
This is the relationship between the mind and the body and the self. So the body is just like compared to computer, the body is like a computer hardware, and that's all it is. And without the mind and without the soul, the body cannot really do anything. Mind is the software. So you need the computer, you need the software to run the computer, like the operating system. Without the operating system, you cannot really, or any applications that you may have. The applications can be compared to different desires that we have, different things that we want to do. Those are the kind of the applications. In software, then you get so many viruses. The viruses are like the ants, basically. They come and start consuming our software and hardware. And so where does the soul fit in it? The soul is basically the electrical current. Unless you plug in, you have the software, you have the hardware, but unless you have the battery in the computer, nothing will work. The same thing with your cell phone. Unless you're the battery, you can't really run the phone. So this is the relationship between the body, mind, and the soul.
We can also think of the mind as a screen. A screen means what? What do we do on a screen? We watch movies, right? So in the same way, the mind actually is continuously showing us movies. It replays stories from the past. It replays, it projects things into the future. And it is described that the mind is also compared to a bird, and it flies on two wings. The wing, one of the wing is the past and the other wing is the future. And so it's continuously spinning out stories for us, and we get caught up in that movie, and we believe that whatever the mind is telling us, we accept that to be true. And the other metaphor that is used is of a window. So a window is what? A window is a tiny opening in a house through which you get a certain view. So say if you have a window that is facing, like my house, like the apartment that we are here in right now, it has a beautiful view. So if you open the window, there are these green fields and there's beautiful mountains. So if I open the window, I get a beautiful view. But a window can also be facing sort of a garbage dump, right? In that case, your window is going to show you a view which is quite disturbing. So depending on where the mind is focused, we're going to get a certain experience of the world. So we can change. So what that means is that we have the power to change the view. And in fact, if you look at real estate, a view, having a good view is like you pay a premium for that, right? But we're living in our own head, and we have the opportunity to really change the view of our, mental mirror, mental window, and face it in a direction which is worth $1 million.
And we can create new windows. So this is the power of the mind. We can create new windows, open them in a different direction. And the Vedas say Atmavat Pashyate Jagat, that we look at the world as ourselves, which means whatever our mind is, that's how we see the world. So we have the power to change that. So this is the Bhagavad Gita says that this is, so you might be wondering what are the different functions of the mind. So mind is just like a tool. As we said, this is like the operating system. So what does it do? So the first thing that the mind does is basically collect the input from all these five senses. All these five senses, they are centered around the mind. Sparsa, Chakshu, Sparsanam cha, Rasanam, Granam, Evacha, Adhisthaya, Manaschayam, Vishayana Upasevate. So in 15th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says all these five senses, they are grouped around the mind. And they send their input to the mind, and that's where the actual perception happens. The senses, they themselves, they don't perceive anything. The tongue does not really perceive anything. The perception happens in the mind. And so that's one of the functions. It takes the input and creates a reality for us. It basically simulates a reality based on the input it has gotten. And then it will, the other important function of the mind is it will accept or reject. So when it gets a certain input, say, I like it, I don't like it, I want this, I don't want this. So this is the continuous function of the mind. It's continuously going. Every single, I was reading somewhere that the mind makes like some 80 or 90,000 decisions every day, continuously thinking, I want this. These are happening very, very fast. We may not recognize it, but it's continuously accepting and rejecting.
It must be so exhausting. It almost feels like you're staying with some like 2-year-old baby, right? Like 2-year-old kid. No, yes. So here are the functions of the mind. So there are three primary functions. Like we said, there is perception. So it takes all of these input from the five senses. And then the mind is basically like a central database where all of these perceptions, memories from our past life, and just to give a little, another side point, that the mind that we have today is the same mind we have had for countless lifetimes, forever. So the same mind has been collecting all of these impressions. They're called sanskaras. In Sanskrit, we use the word samskaras, but really what it means is like just this repository of memory that is there in the mind that triggers us in one direction or the other. And so
that
another
comes
function.
out, yeah, that comes out during the dream. I was saying that in the dreams, many times we see and things that we have never seen before. And that's coming because the mind is remembering things from previous lives or even this life that we have forgotten. And it takes the input and then it creates a reality for us during the dreams.
Exactly. And so now there are three functions of the mind which are always going on, which is what is the first one? That's called thinking. The second one is feeling, and the third is willing. So thinking means that I get some input and I think about it. That's the whole advertising industry is actually centered on these three functions. So they give us some input because of which we think, and then we start developing some feeling about it. Oh, that car looks really nice, or that vacation looks, feels really good. You start imagining yourself in that place. And then what happens? And the third thing kicks in. And the third thing kicks in through the medium of intelligence, which is another aspect of the mind. So the intelligence kicks in and says, oh, my dear mind, you want to go to Hawaii? Okay, let's see what we can do. And so that's where the willing part of the mind comes in or jumps in. And the intelligence, it starts to make plans to satisfy the demands that the mind is making because of the perception that it is receiving from the five senses.
Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, this is my. So I love talking about this relationship between intelligence and mind, because anybody who has been a mother knows that the mind can be compared to a restless toddler, like the terrible twos, right? Those of us who have kids, we know what terrible twos look like. It's like, you take them to the grocery store and they can just sprawl on that grocery store and say, I want my candy, or I want it right now. And they can create a lot of drama. So intelligence. So the mind is compared to this restless, spoiled child, and intelligence is compared to the mother. So now the mother can be either a permissive mother or she can be a disciplined mother, right? So the permissive mother would look at the child and say, oh, really, my dear, you're crying for a candy. It's okay. You can have it. You don't want your dinner. That's fine. You can eat a bag of chips. So that's the nature of a mother or intelligence, which is permissive. And as in contrast to that, you can also have an intelligence, which is which is really in the driving seat, right? And it tells the child, or tells the mind in this case, that I know that you really want a bag of candy, but how about we first eat our broccoli and then let's get to the candy. So this is the relationship between intelligence and mind, mother and a child, and whether the mother is permissive or she's not. And so the whole process of spiritual life is to give that power to the intelligence so that it can guide the mind in the right way.
So the mind is also compared to a monkey mind. It's like a monkey sitting in our mind. Mind is also compared to a monkey, and not just a monkey, but a drunken monkey. Sometimes when you go to places in India like Vrindavan or other places, we have monkeys. These monkeys are quite notorious, and they are constantly looking to grab your stuff and steal things from your house, and they create a havoc. If you happen to leave your door open and a monkey enters, they just create a havoc inside the house. So this is the nature of the mind. It's constantly jumping from one branch to the other, picking something, like a monkey picks up something, eats a little bit and throws it away. So this is like the nature of the mind. It's always restless, like a monkey.
In fact, sometimes the yoga in the yoga community, it is even said it's not just a monkey; it's actually a drunken monkey. So let's continue. Next slide.
So Krishna says, and Arjuna, this is Arjuna's conclusion after hearing from Krishna about doing yoga, studying the mind, sitting still. He says, Chanchalam hi manah Krishna pramathi balavad dridam tasyam nigraham manne vayuriva sudushkaram. The mind is restless, turbulent, obstinate, and very strong, O Krishna, and to subdue it, I think, is more difficult than controlling the wind. So Arjuna, who was such a great yogi himself, he admits in front of everybody that Krishna this mind is like, he's almost calling names to the mind. He's restless. Just try calling these names to somebody. You are restless, you are turbulent, you are obstinate, you're very strong. These are very strong words. So he says that it's easier to control. Like if there's a storm like coming at you at like 150 miles an hour, he says it's easier to control the storm.
Can I just interject, because I can really relate to this analogy right now, because right now I could not even open the front door when our maid just came and Chandana just came. I couldn't open the door. It's so much power right now. I mean, there's so much wind, wind happening. So I can imagine that the mind is even more powerful than that.
Yeah, it is. So Arjuna is saying, I can stand in the middle of a storm and then maybe control the wind. There is some possibility, although that is hard. But he says, I can't control the mind. So don't ask me to do this yoga shoga. This is like sitting in one place, and this is not my cup of tea. Arjuna was such a fierce warrior, and he admits the nature of the mind.
So this is just, so what does this mind do to us? It does to us so many things. It determines whether we are going to be happy or we are going to be miserable. It determines whether we're going to sleep at night or we're going to have a restless, sleepless night. But it also does another thing, which is that it drives us from one body to the next. So every body, the mind says, oh, wouldn't it be nice if you could sleep 6 months of the year? And so then nature will say, all right, this is not a body which is conducive. Let me give you a body where you can actually sleep for 6 months of the year. So then we get a body of a polar bear. So anyways, that's another topic of reincarnation. We'll get into it later. But the point is that the mind is driving us from one body.
Yeah, even in this life, it is driving us, right? From one situation to the next. Even our bodies are changing because of the mind.
So let's forget about this.
Yeah, this is the changing bodies, basically how we change bodies because of the mind. Mind is the primary reason we go from one body to the next. If mind is completely controlled and purified, then we don't have to change bodies.
Oh. the whole modern culture, if you think about it, it's kind of geared towards getting this space in this real estate of our mind, right? Everyone's trying to grab a piece of that real estate because they know that once you get that, then you have the person. And they've started actually targeting very young minds because they know that you start them young, you have them for their entire lives. Let's watch this.
Can you hear me now? Good. When we look at magazines, we see the relentless pursuit of perfection everywhere. So we try harder. We want quality in everything we do. Somehow we're made to believe that inspiration comes standard. But get out there. What are the real ingredients for life? Marketing, whether you like it or not, is a vital part of your world. Marketeers try pleasing people the world over. They use the power of dreams and put our imagination at work. They'll create the illusion of something special in the air. But what they're really interested in is what's in your wallet. And it keeps going and going and going. The miracles of science, and neuroscience in particular, helps us to think different, to look at marketing with higher standards. In this course, you'll learn to never follow manipulative marketing. You'll become like a rock and evaluate commercials in a fair and balanced way. If you want a breakthrough and have it your way, choose freedom for life. You've got questions, we got answers. Take this course because you're worth it. So go on.
Anyways, this is quite a long video. You can watch it. But this is how we get hooked. The mind has a tendency to get hooked. It sees something, it perceives something, and boom. And Bhagavad Gita says that dhyate vishyan pumsa sangasteshu upajayate. That as soon as we see something desirable, we develop a desire to obtain it, and then attachment develops. And from attachment, the intense planning to get it happens, and then the mind just gets carried away. So this is what is getting done here, is getting hooked.
So
And
I
it
think
starts
we,
early.
yeah, it starts really. You like this video, right? So go ahead.
You're watching America This Morning, America's #1 early morning news.
Parents considering giving their toddlers too much too soon in the way of gadgets might want to rethink that strategy.
This is what happens when mom and dad take away an iPad from 2-year-old Ashlyn Brooks. Poor baby, like it's the end of the world. Now, Ashlyn's parents insist that they
stop
will
that.
never use the iPad for educational purposes, but I don't know, maybe create a bit of a monster there.
Yeah, I think so.
Anyways, so this,
Yeah.
our mind is no different.
So, and it never ends. You know, sometimes people might think, okay, maybe the mind gets pacified as you grow older. And of course, this is a famous Akbar Birbal story where Birbal asked this question that Akbar asked this question to Birbal that, you know, at what point, you know, does the mind become free of all these desires? And Birbal said, never. And Akbar couldn't believe it. So then one day there was an old man who was about to die. And Birbal told Akbar that let's go meet him. And when you come, just make sure that you bring your daughter along as well. So he brings the daughter, and then he notices that this old man, even as he's dying, his eyes are fixated upon this daughter of Akbar, and Akbar is not happy. And when they come out, then Birbal tells Akbar that actually, could you see that? So that shows that even in the, you know, the time of death, you know, the mind is still fixated on desires that doesn't satisfy the self. So we can continue.
So this is a beautiful analogy that is given in Mahabharata. This is a verse from Mahabharata. It says how our senses are like tracks.
Can you recite this? It's a beautiful verse.
Yeah. Akuranga matanga patanga bringa mina hata pancha vireva pancha eka pramadi sakatham nahanyate yasevate pancha vieva pancha.
The deer, the elephant, the moth, the bee, and the fish. These 5 meet their end when they're attached to a sense object. Attachment to just one sense object causes a lot of trouble. What about a person who has 5 powerful sense organs?
So our senses are like hooks, and they are extensions of the mind. So a human, each of these animals, like the deer, gets caught because of which sense is the downfall for the deer?
Yeah, this is a mini quiz now. Let's start with the easy. What about the fish? Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, let's start with the easy one, the moth. How does the moth or insect meets its death?
Light.
Light.
Very
So
good.
it's the
Okay.
eye.
Eye. What about the fish?
The thorn. No,
The tongue.
The tongue.
Right.
It wants to eat something desirable and it gets caught in the bait.
What about the bee?
honey.
Honey.
It
Right.
gets stuck in the hive, and then I think it dies, right? Like when you see, like in India, when I see all the bee, when, you know, these vendors come to sell fresh honey, then basically it's a big blob of honey and all the bee are stuck to it. You
Right.
died having
Right.
the honey.
Nice. Yeah. And then
And
what
similarly,
about,
yeah, go ahead. I think we should.
no, go ahead. Please go ahead.
So I was saying that we could move along.
Okay. Okay. Let's move along.
Yes. Yeah, so the deer gets trapped because of the sound, because of the ear. The hunter plays beautiful music, and the deer will just stand in front of the hunter and gets easily shot. And the elephant gets trapped because of a sense of touch. So the way they train, they capture a big mighty elephant, if you may have wondered, is that they tie a female elephant and makes the male elephant. No, they tie this male elephant and makes it's the other way around, right?
No. What they do is they actually create a little pit. And then in that pit, they, it's a big hole, and then they cover that hole with a lot of like twigs and branches and all that. And then they train a she elephant. So the she elephant goes close to the he elephant and sort of brushes against him, and he becomes maddened, and then he runs after her. When he runs after her, she's trained. She knows that there is a pit, so she goes around the pit, but he doesn't know. So he goes straight, and then he falls into the pit, and that's how he's captured. So it's a sense of touch.
So animals, they only have like a one particular weak sense, but humans, we have all the five senses, which can be trapped. So, and the center point is again the mind. So if the mind is powerful, then it won't be trapped. But if the mind is not strong, then it can easily be trapped by any one of these. So the question is now, mind is so strong, like what do I do? How do I curb the mind? So Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita 6:35, he says, Asamshayam mahabhavo mano durnigraham chalam abhyasena tu kaunteya vairagyena chagrihate. He says, O mighty armed son of Kunti, it is undoubtedly very difficult to curb the restless mind, but it is possible by suitable practice and by detachment. So
what is our practice? Yeah.
So now we'll get into the.
So before we do that, should we just quickly take like 2 minutes and see if there are any reflections? Because now from here we are going to talk about the solution. So we're going to talk about 4 T's that can be sort of our toolbox. We can put this in our spiritual toolbox and collect these different ways in which we can control the mind. So, but before we talk about that, we'd like to take some reflections and some questions. So reflection is something that you heard that you want to share back with the group.
So something that's stuck in your mind.
Yes, Jyoti, go ahead.
I'm still reflecting.
You're still reflecting. Okay.
Yeah.
Anything that you heard that made it that you thought, oh, I'm going to take this with you. Like say you walked out of the room right now and somebody said, what was that class about? What would you say? One line.
Yeah, I would say it was all about the distractions that the mind causes and how we are going to address that problem. And that would be by controlling the mind. But believe me, even for the smallest things, it's difficult to control the mind. For instance, every morning when I get up, I just must have my 2 cups of tea. I cannot forgo that. But I've also been told to take a particular medicine on an empty stomach. Now, what I do is every morning I'll say, okay, not today, tomorrow. Not today, tomorrow. And I've never gotten around to taking that medicine. I still have it lying in the fridge because I can't control my mind. I have to have my tea.
Exactly. And Arjuna has a great, Arjuna has a great word.
No, I've really been thinking, how do I handle this problem? What do I do? Because I need this to strengthen my bones. And every time I go to the doctor, he tells me, did you take the medicine? And I tell him, no, I couldn't.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
At the end of this session, I really hope I can control that.
Exactly. And that's the process. And that's why, spiritual life, and we'll talk about that, how we can sort of start reining in the mind and actually not even controlling the mind. Our process is to transform the mind. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. So anybody else? Any questions or comments? Yes, Matt, did you?
Yeah, there's a quote that I heard. It kind of reminds me of what we've been talking about, that the mind makes like a horrible master, but a wonderful servant. So the idea of like learning how to control the mind, a lot of great stuff can come from that.
Wow, that's beautiful. Yeah, that's very nice. Yeah.
Harnessing the overpowering mind.
Yeah, we have to harness the overpowering mind. Once we do that, then we really can tap into the deepest potential of the mind. The mind is not to be denied, but we just need to learn how to harness the mind. Right now, we are just being controlled and tossed around. So nice, very nice. Thank you so much, Matt. Thank you, Usha. Anybody else? Have you guys also experienced the onslaught of the mind?
Almost every day.
Almost every day, right? Yeah. So maybe we can continue, is it?
Yeah.
And then we can take more questions.
So Krishna guarantees that it is possible. So we have hope.
Jyoti, full hope.
Full hope, complete hope. Otherwise, he won't say it. So these are the 4 T's for transforming the mind. So we are not just talking about controlling the mind, because the word is nobody likes to be controlled. So we don't tell the mind that, okay, I'm going to come and control you. We tell mind that we'll work together and we'll evolve. And so this is what transforming the mind means. These are the 4 T's: tolerate.
Actually, as far as controlling, sometimes if you think about it, like just as a form of encouragement, the British government ruled India for what, 200 years, right? And so, like, say if you would just go to them and say, oh, my dear sir, we now want to reclaim ourselves, can you please leave us alone? It's not going to happen, right? Because they have enjoyed the power over the country. So in the same way, the mind has actually been in control of us for countless lifetimes. So it's not just a direct process of saying, okay, leave me alone, right? Or just like Jyoti is saying that every day I want to do it, but I cannot do it. So we need some tools, right? So the first one is this idea of tolerating. So go ahead.
Yeah, tolerate, train, thrive, and taste. So we'll start with tolerate first. So Krishna says, we read that verse, that how desires will come to our mind, and instead of just giving into those desires, giving into those impulses, the first step in transforming the mind is to tolerate the desires. So we acknowledge the desires, first of all. We don't deny those desires, or we don't have a guilt about those desires. Okay, we may have good and bad desires, but the first step to tolerate those desires is to accept that, okay, I have these desires. And then the next step is to kind of delay them. So instead of just acting on them right away, tolerating means that we delay them. We just say, okay, I'll just do it tomorrow. Or if there's a bad desire, we say, okay, I won't do it today, I'll just do it. Let me try it tomorrow. We kind of push it. We push it forward. And if there's a positive desire, then we don't delay. We just do it right away. We don't wait on something positive. So say if you have to start a good habit, or if you want to start exercising, or if you want to say something positive to somebody, then we don't wait. We just do it right away. And instead of planning for it, or maybe after 10 days I will start it, just do it right away, and then see, you'll get the strength from doing it. And same thing, when we delay those negative desires, then we get the strength we get the confidence. So I can delay it. I can delay it for 1 day, now I can delay it for 5 days. And so that's one of the do you have anything else on tolerating desires? There are so many things could be said.
Yeah, I was just thinking that one of the ways that we can tolerate desires is by becoming an observer of those desires. So, we start seeing ourselves as like separate from those desires, as separate from this mind. Just because the mind is saying something, we actually start viewing the mind as this toddler. You can have a mental image that this is a toddler speaking to me and saying, I want this and I want this right now. So now I can take a step back. I can observe the desire. I can hear that desire, but I can decide. I still have the power to decide whether I want to fulfill the desire of the mind or I don't. And that's called tolerating.
Yeah, so that's a good point, like recognizing whose desires are they, and are they my desires or my mind's desire? So when we make the difference in our mind, then you'll start feeling some detachment. Krishna is saying practice and detachment. So tolerating also means detachment. That what will happen if I don't fulfill this? Also analyzing it. Okay, what will happen if I don't fulfill this? So going through that process, the mind recognizes, okay, I don't need it. Maybe I don't need it anymore.
Go to the next one. So this
the
is
fifth-
our biggest tool. 1 second before you continue. This
Yeah,
is
go
our
ahead.
biggest tool. This is training the mind. So the mind, like we said, is a restless animal. It's a restless monkey and it needs to be trained. And the whole process of yoga, the whole process of meditation is actually meant to bring the mind out of this 80% negative thought loop, repetitive, 95% repetitive loop. And the very word mantra, by the way, man means the mind and tra means that which can free the mind. So right now the mind is actually completely a captive to this negativity. So mantra is that sound vibration. It's the training that we can give to our mind that can free the mind from all of this unnecessary worries and fear and anger and resentment and all of these negative things that are holding us back. So we can watch this little video and then.
Mantras are, they're not descriptive things. They're like, boulders of energetic sound.
There was some part of me was like, oh, this is way too hippie, but in the same time, I felt I needed a big change in my life. I needed to find a completely new relationship with myself.
The mantra is an amazing medicine for the mind.
It's not about becoming something else. It's not about even losing yourself. It's about becoming yourself.
Mantra can help you to make the mind totally in silence. When there are no vibrations, then you can see yourself who you are.
I was searching for something that made sense. The American vision of meeting someone, giving money, all of that. And still, it was like I was empty inside.
We're seeing a shift in the function of a very essential structure in the brain, the thalamus, that probably changes the way we see reality.
The bottom line is making that connection is what giving me the power to actually exist.
I was just thinking that mantra is like opening new windows in the mind, right?
Yeah, it's developing new muscles. It's becoming a different person altogether because the mind is also very amenable to change. Although the mind seems very obstinate, but it is also very flexible. It can change very quickly because that's the nature of the mind.
I was just thinking that, if you think about it, the mind is the center and it's the barometer and it's the tool of our happiness. It's the state of the mind determines the state of our happiness. And yet we have gyms for the body, right? We train to make our muscles strong, to make our body strong, but we don't think that our mind also requires a certain kind of training so that it can function in the most optimal manner and keep us happy.
Because we spend the most time with our mind. Compared to anybody else, that is the most amount of time. And once the mind is trained, then mind becomes like a pass-through to our soul. We have easy access to our soul once the mind is trained. Otherwise, the mind is like a thick wall standing between us and the soul. Rather, the soul cannot really express itself as long as the mind is in the way.
We can go to the next one.
So this is more like a scientific experiment they have done, where they have sometimes people may say, oh, meditation, mantra, I don't really get it. But here we can see that they have done experiments and they see that.
Maybe we can just talk about it instead of sharing the video, because I think because of time limitation, they can watch this on their own. Or do we have time?
We have a little bit of time. I think this is a nice video.
My co-author of the book Altered Traits is a neuroscientist, Richard Davidson. He has a lab at the University of Wisconsin. It's a very large lab. He has dedicated scanners. He has about 100 people working there. And he was able to do some remarkable research where he flew Olympic-level meditators who live in Nepal or India, typically, or some in France. He flew them over to the lab and put them through a protocol in his brain scanners and did state-of-the-art tests, and the results were just astounding. We found, for example, or he found, that their brainwaves are really different. Perhaps the most remarkable finding in the Olympic level meditators has to do with what's called a gamma wave. All of us get gamma for a very short period when we solve a problem we've been grappling with, even if it's something that's vexed us for months. We get about a half second of gamma. It's the strongest wave in the EEG spectrum. We get it when we bite into an apple or imagine biting into an apple. And for a brief period, a split second, inputs from taste, sound, smell, vision, all of that come together in that imagined bite into the apple. But that lasts very, very short period in an ordinary EEG. What was stunning was that the Olympic level meditators, these are people who've done up to 62,000 lifetime hours of meditation, their brainwave shows gamma very strong all the time as a lasting trait, just no matter what they're doing. It's not a state effect, it's not during their meditation alone, but it's just their everyday state of mind. We actually have no idea what that means experientially. Science has never seen it before. We also find that in these Olympic level meditators, when we ask them, for example, to do a meditation on compassion, their level of gamma jumps 700 to 800% in a few seconds. This has also never been seen by science. So we have to assume that the special state of consciousness that you see in the highest level meditators is a lot like something described in the classical meditation literature centuries ago, which is that there is a state of being which is not like our ordinary state.
Pause here, maybe. Actually, I just wanted to share something that I remember when we went to drop our son to college, and it was a very stressful, a very highly competitive college. We went and spoke to the director of student, what was it? What was that office? Student
Affairs, yeah.
Student Affairs, right. So we spoke to the director of Student Affairs, and I asked her, I said, what would you recommend to a student who's coming into college? What would be the number one thing you would recommend so that he can function in college and really, do the best, deal with all the stress and everything? And her response was meditation. And she said, meditation followed by sleep, followed by the rest. Which is, so this is something that more and more people are recognizing. There was an article that said that very soon doctors will recommend meditation, just like, they recommend brushing your teeth every day. So that's how important, having a daily practice, which, where we get to really spend time with ourselves and really bring the mind. It's like an antivirus. We talked about the mind being a software. So we need an antivirus program that can eliminate all of this negativity on a daily basis. And this is a story from the American Indian, the native Indian culture in America, where they talk about how these two foxes, and these two foxes, one is a good fox and the other is a bad fox. And this is a question that is asked, it's actually a poem. And the question is asked that, these two foxes are fighting with each other. And, the question is asked, like, which fox is going to win? And the answer is the fox that you feed is the fox that's going to win. So what's our
third principle? Yeah, that's the tribe. That's the third principle. Go ahead.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, so the tribe means who do we hang out with? Who do we feed? It also means that what is our association? A powerful part of transforming the mind is choosing our the company. And when we have that kind of a company, then the mind, it becomes so much easier to transform the mind. If we hang out with somebody who is into something, naturally our mind will be attracted to doing that thing. And when we have that spiritual company, even a little bit, mind starts getting attracted to that. And then it becomes naturally easier to transform the mind. So choosing our tribe carefully.
That's the one singular thing that can really change a lot, is to just find, association in every respect. What we hear, what are the input, what kind of input? Like in Ayurveda, it is described that we are what we eat, and so it's called ahar. But ahar is not just what we put in our mouth. Ahar is also what we see through our eyes. Ahar is also what we hear through the ears. So the kind of ahar that we take in is also going to determine the quality of our mind. So we can continue. So here is, this is actually the ultimate point. The Bhagavad Gita, such a wise text. It doesn't say, it understands and acknowledges the fact that it is practically impossible to control this mind. Arjuna says that too, right? I cannot control it. So Krishna recommends, he says, don't worry about controlling. Let's just talk about transforming. So let's just go to the mind and say, hey, my dear mind, what do you really want? What can satisfy you? And the mind would say, well, I want pleasure. I think we started with that, right? That everyone's looking for happiness. Everyone's looking for pleasure. So if the mind is given, so like, for example, any one of us who have raised a child, you tell the child, you go sit in that corner and don't do anything. Don't look at it. Don't look at anything. Don't touch anything. How long do you think the child can sit in a corner? We all know the answer, right? It's not much. So now instead, and I remember because we homeschooled our son, and because our son loved to do art and also to write, he could sit and do that for like 4 hours, 5 hours even. And that's because he had a taste for it. So the Bhagavad Gita and all the ancient wisdom texts, they recommend that instead of trying to artificially, mechanically control the mind, give the mind something that the mind will really enjoy doing. And that's called param drishtva nivartate, which means giving it a higher taste.
So
and
let's
this is
watch this video.
Yeah, let's watch this video.
These monkeys have turned to a life of crime. Brazen, audacious. They're deliberately targeting humans. They never hurt their marks. They're just grabbing anything of value. But this stealing is still all about food. Just not in the way that you'd expect. They're holding our stuff for ransom. You see, these monkeys are stealing valuables they know we want back, and then using them to barter with us for food. They won't give up their loot, not until they're offered the specific food that they want. Often, it's the fare with the highest nutritional value.
So this is the higher taste, like the mind is going to do its monkey thing. But if you give it a more nutritious, more tasteful thing, and the mind will naturally like it. And once the mind develops a taste for something, then you don't have to control it. The mind will follow it, its own lead. And the whole process of transformation becomes very, very natural. So this is Krishna's advice is to give the mind a little bit of a taste for some higher consciousness, a little bit of a taste for the spiritual vibration. And the mind will become healthier and it will like it and it will naturally follow it.
In fact, it's very simple to understand, right? That suppose somebody were to come and give us a huge, dinner platter filled with our most favorite stuff, then we would eat that very happily, right? And after that, if somebody gave us something else, then we would like, oh, but I'm full, I don't need it. So that's what happens when the mind actually attains this pleasure that it's looking for. It's just looking for it in the wrong place. But when it actually finds it, then it's very easily, it's able to give up all its lower, destructive, unnecessary distractions that doesn't serve it in any way. It's able to happily give it up and say, I don't care for that anymore. Now I have what I'm looking for. So that's the process of spiritual transformation. So I think this is kind of the end. Yeah.
Yeah, this is kind of concluding. We can't do justice to the topic of mind in one session, but it's a big topic. But we touched on the most important concepts about the mind, that mind is not us, first of all. It's just a layer on top of the soul to help it navigate this world. And it is matter, it is inanimate, it has nothing to do with us, but we can use it as a tool. If you make it a friend, then the mind becomes the greatest source of power for us. Otherwise, the mind is, by nature, it is material, and therefore it will be attracted to matter. Matter is attracted to matter. So we have to slowly transform the mind into our friend by this process of tolerate, train, tribe, and taste, and we can do that. There's so many ways of doing that the Bhagavad Gita recommends, and
we'll talk more about that in the further future sessions. We can talk more. Yeah. So thank you. Now we would love to hear from you because we've been talking for an hour, and now we are eager to hear from you. So the next session is about karma. Big topic. Why do bad things happen to good people? If you have ever wondered why somebody who's really nasty, how come they have it made and I struggle? What kind of, so big topics, we'll talk about that. And some people say, if it's everything is destiny, then why should I even do anything? So we'll talk about the interplay between karma, destiny, free will. Is it all predestined? Do I have a say? How much of a say do I have? And finally, how to become free from karma.
And all the course content, please join the BhaktiWise website. All our course material is available there. Slides, the recordings, the summary, the verses to read. So please join that. It's a simple login process. You create a login, username, password, and boom, you're in. And then you can access the course content. And you can also follow us on Instagram and then write us an email on this if you have any questions.
So we'll now take reflections and questions. Hey, Jyoti, so good to see you.
No, I was just thinking, look, I understood most of the T's, but I could not understand tribe. But if it's a very long explanation, then I suppose...
No, tribe is actually quite simple. It's basically this association. Like right now what we are doing, in order to control the mind, it needs an environment where the mind can start feeling inspiration. So in order to do anything, like for example, if I want to engage in some kind of a real estate investment, for example, then I need to hang around with those people who are also engaged similarly. So in the same way, we find a tribe of people, because say, if you hang out with people who say, let's just do bar hopping every night, so then the mind is going to be influenced. Mind actually takes on the color of its association. Wherever you put the mind, that's the color it will take on.
So basically, you have to get into a group that thinks like you.
Yes.
Right.
Without that,
at least have some connection with people who are into that, because those thoughts will become more and more stronger. They will be emphasized, and then you will feel comfortable doing that. Otherwise, you feel alone. You feel weak. You don't feel like doing it. You feel left out. Mind says, okay, it's difficult, let's do something else.
Okay.
Also, the mind gets a taste, and that's why we create even these online communities and of course in-person communities, so that people start developing deep loving relationships, and through that mind is just completely happy and pacified and doesn't need anything else after that.
Thank you, Vibha. That really made sense to me now.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And whenever you guys feel up to it, we can do, some mantra practice. It's something that also we teach and offer. So if that's something you want to do, just let us know, shoot us a message, and we'll plan something in the future.
So, I have a question. So while a lot of things which, you are telling, many things are, maybe we have come across, we have read, but how do we really get started on this journey? To train the mind and to sustain on that journey.
It's a very good question, Amitabh. Yeah, and I think the easiest way to do that is what you're already doing, is coming together and talking about what does Bhagavad Gita say. The other thing that really helps the mind is this mantra meditation that we teach, and we have an online session that goes every day for doing mantra meditation. And mantra meditation has been documented in our Vedic text as a very powerful and easy way to meditate. And so that meditation, what it does is it really changes the mind from inside out. It's like vacuuming your mind, taking out there's so many things that are there in our mind, desires, feelings and emotions, and so many things. And most of them, we are not even aware of them. 99% of them, it's all hidden deep inside our mind. So mantra meditation can actually help us to just take it out. It's like a vacuum, takes it out, makes the mind healthy again, and it makes the mind desire. The mind naturally starts desiring this transformation, and it becomes natural. And one can start with even 1 or 2 minutes a day, 5 minutes a day.
Actually, the best way to do it is in a group, and like you're saying that, we don't realize that, we often struggle with our relationships, and we wonder, why are we struggling with our relationships? It's because, again, our relationship can be as good as the state of our mind. So when we engage in a daily practice like this, then we become more pacified. So the best way, I think, as Diego is also asking, Geeta is also asking, that we can maybe if those of you who are interested, we can just, every day we just come together for like maybe 10-15 minutes, and we just engage in a daily meditation practice. And we have done this in the past as well, where we do this 21-day mantra meditation challenge, where we commit to doing this mantra meditation practice for 21 days, and then we experience the transformation, and then we see, how that changes our experience of the mind. So anyone who's interested, do let us know, then we can create a batch for you guys as well.
Sure, thanks.
Thank you. Anupam, any questions? Viva, any questions or comments from you? You survived the first session.
I have a question. Hare
Yes.
Krishna.
Manjari.
Gap.
Yeah, nice. There is Goka's friends, and then there's my friend from school. Yeah, go ahead.
Said something, Lalit, which really touched my thing. You said soul cannot express itself when mind is in the way. And then towards the end of that video, which you were showing before this, it was talking about the special state of consciousness in the highest level of meditators. So I've been meditating for a while, like mantra meditating, and I do see the benefits on the mind. And of course, there must be benefits on the consciousness. But as we read more of the Bhagavad Gita and we start to understand the difference between the mind and the consciousness and the soul, my question is that how does this mind, how does the mantra meditation really get to the consciousness from the mind? Like if we were to understand the technicality of that, I understand that the mind the chatter stops and the mind feels peaceful, and we want, and we hope for the grace of Krishna to flow. But how does it really reach the consciousness?
The consciousness is always there. Without the consciousness, the mind also cannot work. So because the mind is turbulent, our consciousness is also becomes turbulent. The consciousness gets dragged or overpowered by the mind. So what the mantra meditation does is basically takes the mind out of the way. And the mind then becomes a follower of our consciousness rather than our consciousness following the mind. So, and that's how we distinguish between the mind. We are able to distinguish between the mind and the consciousness. Otherwise, they are mixed together. We are not able to differentiate. So this is how we get to the consciousness technically. The consciousness is always there, but the mind comes in the way. So when the mind kind of goes out of the way, then we are able to access the deepest self. Krishna says in the 6th chapter that one who has controlled the mind, the super soul, is already reached. So we are able to connect. It's just somebody standing in the way. That's all. The mind is standing in the way. As soon as the mind goes out of the way, then it's like, boom, the channel is open now. And
right.
There's not too much to it. It's not like a complex process. It's like the door is.
It seems like a very simple answer to a very complicated question that I asked.
Yeah,
And,
it is not, there's not much to it. As I understand, it's not like you have to go through this room and that room and then open the left door and then go through that. And it's not, none of that. It's like a very straightforward passage. Krishna is sitting in the heart as a super soul, and he's willing to communicate with us, but our mind is in the way. So we make our mind our friend, and then the mind also wants to talk to Krishna. Then both of us together, it becomes so much easier.
But what I'm going to ask one quick question, that nowadays this whole hue and cry about the mindfulness, practice of mindfulness. So we're actually trying to say the reverse, that you want to calm the mind, but actually practice operate from your deeper, not from the mind.
Actually, I'm so happy you brought that point, mindfulness. Actually, if the heart falls in love, then the mind will follow the heart. So we are now going from, so the act of just mindfulness or just emptying the mind or stilling the mind is a more difficult practice. But like say, if you have ever noticed a person who's in love with another person, then their mind is anyways always there, right? They're always constantly thinking about that person. So it's very easy for a person, and not just a person, like people love to do art, or some people just love some thing. You see how they get so absorbed in it. So the whole process of spiritual life as taught by Krishna is like, okay, let's not just talk about mindfulness, let's talk about heartfulness and soulfulness, and then the mind is a no-brainer. It'll just follow.
Mind is actually a follower. The nature of the mind is to follow, and it just needs a worthy person to follow. And it gets frustrated and brokenhearted and just following wrong targets. So once you give the mind the right target to follow, the mind will just latch on, and then it will not go here and there after that.
I can see that Diego and Geeta, they're asking and requesting. Thank you, Diego, you want to create a 21-day challenge. Yeah, we can do that. So maybe you guys can all share on the WhatsApp group who's interested, and also the time zone. I know that, Diego, where are you based in?
Diego is in India.
Oh, he's also in India. Okay, so then that's perfect. Okay, so that's perfect. So we can do something. Yeah, it's 21 consecutive days. And we have, like I said, we have done this with an international group, like, a few times. And, by the time it's like 15 and 16, they're like, oh my God, it's going to end soon. What will happen after that? So it's really powerful. So give it a try if you have the time and the desire. We encourage that. So, all right.
So we can end it here.